What happens when a man who can buy anything finally wants something that money can't touch? The story begins in the high glass towers of Manhattan, where the city never sleeps but one man does not dream. Adrian Vale, billionaire, investor, shark. His empire stretches from Singapore to London, from tech to oil to human lives. If the price is right, they call him the icebroker, not for his business acumen but for the way his heart seems carved out of frost. Every deal he makes, he wins. Every person he meets, he studies. But one evening, in a room filled with the hum of wealth and the echo of fake laughter, Adrian signs a deal that doesn't feel like victory. It feels like something else, a trap, or perhaps the beginning. The gala is held in a marble hall lined with gold leaf ceilings. Waiters glide between politicians and CEOs like chess pieces in a silent war. Adrian stands by the window, staring down at the city below, a city that worships him. Then he sees her, Lena Carver. She isn't supposed to be there. Not on the guest list. Not in that dress red, like a cut across the room. She doesn't approach him at first. She simply looks. And for the first time in years, Adrian can't look away. She smiles, not the way people smile at billionaires, but like she knows a secret. Then she disappears into the crowd. Hours later, when the gala ends, a single envelope sits on Adrian's table. No name, no logo, just his initials embossed in wax. Inside a photograph, grainy black and white, taken from a distance. It's of Adrian, shaking hands with a man who's been missing for years. The caption reads, "You don't know the whole story." The next morning, Lena Carver is waiting in his office. She doesn't knock. She walks in like she owns the air. "You signed a deal with the wrong people," she says. "And now you're in mine." Adrian studies her calm, her confidence, the way she's unafraid in the presence of power. "I don't make mistakes," he says. She smiles. That's what they all say before they lose everything. Outside, rain slides down the windows like smoke. Inside, the two of them stand locked in a quiet standoff, one built on lies neither of them has spoken yet. Lena claims to be an intermediary, a fixer for those who make the kind of deals that can't be written on paper, the kind Adrian just made. She tells him the man he shook hands with, the one presumed dead, was part of a covert syndicate moving billions through shell companies tied to arms trading. And now, that money and that man's enemies are linked to Adrian. At first, Adrian doesn't believe her. He doesn't have to. He has people for that. But within hours, his systems start crashing. Offshore accounts frozen, phones tapped, one of his jets impounded by Interpol. And yet the only person who seems to know how to stop it is Lena Carver. They form a temporary alliance. Temporary, because Adrian doesn't trust anyone, and Lena doesn't seem to trust herself. She tells him they need to go off the grid, trace the deal back through the offshore maze she claims to have built years ago. Her tone slips sometimes, not like a criminal, but like someone who once believed in something before the world broke her. The first night they go on the run, Adrian's penthouse burns. A message. His empire is being dismantled piece by piece. They hide in a safe house on the outskirts of the city, glass replaced by concrete, luxury traded for silence. For the first time in his adult life, Adrian makes coffee for someone else. She watches him. "You really don't know how deep this goes, do you?" she says softly. He turns to her. "Then tell me," but she doesn't. Not yet. Days blur. Plans form. At night, they sit by a cracked fireplace, shadows dancing across their faces like flickering memories. Adrian begins to notice things about her, the way her hands tremble when the phone rings, the way her eyes harden when he says the word trust. There's a scar on her wrist, old, thin, carefully hidden beneath a watch. One evening, when the storm outside drowns the city in thunder, Adrian finds her staring out the window, lost in thought. "You're not just helping me," he says quietly. "You're trying to fix something you broke." She doesn't answer. He steps closer. "Who are you really working for?" She turns to him, her voice barely a whisper. For the truth he discovers, is heavier than any fortune. Lena used to be one of his people, a financial architect buried deep in his network. Years ago, she found out that one of Adrian's deals, one of thousands, funded a warlord's private army. She leaked the documents to the press. People died. The story was buried. So was she. Now she's back, not for revenge, but for redemption. The deal Adrian signed reignited the same pipeline she once exposed. She wants to stop it. He wants to survive it. Their alliance becomes a dance between survival and confession, between attraction and danger. She knows every move he'll make before he makes it. He begins to realize that for all his wealth, he's never met someone he couldn't buy until her. And that terrifies him, because when the most powerful man in the room finally feels powerless, something inside him breaks. Days turn into weeks. The names vanish from databases. They travel under aliases to Zurich, to Prague, to places where digital footprints disappear in smoke. Each night, Lena traces patterns on maps with a trembling pen, trying to find the origin of the shell company behind the deal. Adrian watches her, watches the way she bites her lip when she's close to an answer, the way her walls come down for a fraction of a second when she forgets he's watching. Then one night she finds it, a name buried deep inside a web of numbered accounts, Varen Holdings. Adrian freezes. Varen was the name of his first company, the one he sold years ago, under mysterious terms. He thought it had dissolved, but it hadn't. Someone resurrected it, and someone used it to sign the contract in his name. Lena looks at him. Who did you sell it to? He hesitates. For the first time, he looks afraid. Her name was Celeste Varon. My fiancé. The silence after that feels like gravity. Celeste Varon died 5 years ago or so, everyone believed. Now Lena's eyes widen, the color draining from her face. Adrian, if she's alive, she's the one behind all this. And that's when the first gunshot breaks the window. The world erupts in glass and darkness. Adrian pulls Lena down as bullets slice through the room. Shadows move outside, not cops, not mercenaries, professionals, sent to erase them both. They escape through the fire escape, rain pounding like war drums on metal. Down the alley, a black car idles with its lights off. Lena grabs Adrian's hand, not as a hostage, not as leverage, but as someone who refuses to let go. They dive inside, tires screeching as they vanish into the night. Breathing hard, Adrian looks at her. How did they find us? She looks back, eyes glistening. They didn't. She didn't. Far away, across the city skyline, a figure stands on a balcony, wine glass in hand. The reflection of fire dances in her eyes. Celeste Varon, the woman Adrian once promised the world, and who now seems determined to take it from him. She whispers to herself, a small, chilling smile playing at her lips. You always wanted a challenge, Adrian. Let's see if you can survive love. Back in the car, Lena's voice trembles. She's not just after you, she's after everyone tied to that deal, including me. Adrian clenches the steering wheel, the rain blurring the world into streaks of silver and shadow. Then we end it, he says. Lena shakes her head. You can't end something that started with a lie. The city lights fade behind them. Two fugitives, one chasing truth, the other haunted by his own past, bound together by a deal that was supposed to make him richer, but instead may cost them both their lives. Somewhere, in the quiet hum between thunder and silence, something has shifted. The icebreaker has begun to melt, and Lena Carver, she's no longer sure if she's saving him or falling for him. As dawn breaks over the wet highway, Adrian's phone buzzes. One message, no number, no signature. It reads, You can't hide from love, Adrian. You taught me that. He looks at Lena, it's her. Lena meets his eyes, whispering, then the game just started. The car disappears into the fog, two ghosts chasing a past that refuses to stay buried. And in the reflection of a shattered deal, love begins to look a lot like war. The car carved through the rain like a blade through fog, its headlights slicing silver paths into the darkness. The city was shrinking behind them, its skyline a fading constellation of power and regret. Adrian gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw locked in silence. Beside him, Lena stared out the window, her reflection fractured by the passing streetlights, a face torn between guilt and defiance. Neither spoke for miles. The hum of the engine filled the silence between them, a heartbeat of tension neither wanted to break. Finally, Adrian spoke. Where do we go? Lena's eyes flickered toward him. Somewhere no one remembers your name. That place doesn't exist, he said quietly. It will, she replied. If we make it. She reached for the glove compartment, pulling out a small flash drive sealed in a steel casing. Everything we need is on this. Names, transfers, offshore accounts, the whole network tied to Varon Holdings. But there's a catch. Adrian shot her a glance. There's always a catch. It's encrypted, and the key isn't digital, it's human. He frowned, meaning. Celeste built the access sequence around a single identity, someone who can verify it through biometric code. Her old partner. Adrian's voice dropped an octave. You're saying it's me? She nodded slowly. Your DNA is the final cipher. For a long moment, he didn't answer, just stared at the storm ahead, as if trying to read fate in the lightning. In another life, the mention of Celeste's name would have softened his tone, a woman he once believed was the future. But now, it sounded like a wound. She was supposed to be gone, buried with the part of him that once cared about anything beyond the next acquisition. Lena's voice broke the silence. We can't stay on the road. They'll expect that. Then where? She hesitated. There's a safe node 2 hours north. Off-grid belongs to someone who owes me. Adrian didn't ask who. He just nodded. The rain softened to mist as the car turned off the highway, the city lights replaced by endless stretches of pine and fog. By the time they reached the safe house, a decaying lodge hidden behind a curtain of trees, dawn had begun to leak through the clouds. Inside, the air smelled of dust and memories. Faded wallpaper, old photographs, a fireplace long forgotten. Lena dropped her bag, moving like someone who'd been here before. Adrian watched her. You've used this place before, she gave a faint smile. Once when I needed to disappear. He moved to the window, watching the sun creep over the mist. You're good at that, she turned, her voice almost tender. So are you. They spent the next hour setting up equipment, encrypted routers, old laptops patched through anonymous satellites. The glow of screens painted their faces in cold light. Adrian inserted the flash drive. The moment he did, a string of commands appeared on the monitor, static. Then a voice. Hello, Adrian. celestesvoice.com/elegant, as if she was sitting right beside them. Lena froze. Adrian's hands went still. You found the first key. The recording continued. I knew you would. You were always predictable in your genius. Her tone shifted, softening. You shouldn't have signed that contract, Adrian. You thought it was business. It was personal. Static. Then silence. Lena exhaled. She's toying with us. Adrian stared at the screen. No, she's warning us. Lena shook her head. You don't warn someone before you destroy them. He turned toward her, eyes cold. You don't know her like I do. Her voice trembled slightly. No, but I know women who've been broken by men like you. Maybe she's just returning the favor. Adrian didn't respond. He just stood there, the glow of the monitor cutting across his face like a confession. Hours passed. Lena decoded fragments, tracing ghost data through dark servers. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Files led to companies that didn't exist, bank accounts under names that belonged to the dead. Someone had been building an empire in his shadow, using his identity, his power, his absence. And every trail circled back to one place. Revel 9, a private data facility buried under an abandoned research complex outside Montreal. Lena looked at the coordinates. That's where she is. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then that's where we're going. Adrian, she said softly, you don't get it. If Celeste built this network, it's not just about money. It's about control. She doesn't want to kill you. She wants to rewrite you. He met her gaze, eyes sharp as ice. Then let her try. They left before dusk, the sky bleeding into crimson streaks. The drive north was silent, except for the low hum of thoughts neither dared to speak. At a gas station near the border, Lena stepped out to make a call. Adrian watched her through the windshield, the way she paced, shoulders tight, voice low. When she returned, her eyes were darker. Who was it, he asked. No one, she lied. He didn't press, but that night, as they crossed into Canada, he saw her slip a small device into her jacket pocket, something he hadn't given her. By midnight, the facility loomed in the distance, a relic of concrete and forgotten science, half swallowed by the forest. Power lines hung dead, windows shattered, but inside, faint lights pulsed. Looks abandoned, Adrian whispered. Lena's voice was steady. It's not. They entered through a service tunnel, flashlights cutting through damp air. The deeper they went, the colder it became, not just from the concrete, but from something unseen. They reached a door marked with a single letter V. Adrian hesitated. Varen Lena's fingers brushed the scanner. It blinked red, then green. The door slid open. Inside was a chamber of glass and light. Rows of servers hummed softly. At the center, a terminal glowing with a pulse like a heartbeat, and on the wall, projected in white letters, "Welcome home, Adrian." His pulse quickened. She's been waiting. Lena stepped forward cautiously. This isn't a server farm, it's a mirror. What do you mean? She pointed at the screens. Each one displayed fragments of Adrian's life. Business calls, meetings, private recordings, even moments alone in his penthouse. Every decision he'd made, every conversation recorded, catalogued, analyzed. Lena whispered, "She's been building a copy of you." Adrian stared at the wall of his own life. Why? Before she could answer, the speakers crackled. "Because you were never meant to end the story," Celeste's voice said. Lena spun around. "She's here." A figure emerged from the shadows, elegant, poised, her face half lit by the flickering monitors. Celeste Varen. Time froze. She looked unchanged, almost ethereal, the same measured grace that once disarmed boardrooms and hearts alike. But her eyes, they were colder, sharper. "Hello, Adrian," she said, stepping forward. "You look tired." He didn't move. "You're supposed to be dead." She smiled faintly. "I was, but death is easier when you're forgotten. You taught me that." Lena raised her gun. "End this, Celeste." Celeste's gaze flicked to her. Lena Carver, the whistleblower who tried to cleanse her soul with data leaks. "Tell me, did it work? Or did you just find a new man to save you?" Lena's hands shook. "This isn't about me." Celeste tilted her head. "Everything is about you, dear. You're the only person he can't buy, and the one thing I can use." Before Lena could respond, Celeste tapped a control on her wrist. The lights dimmed, and the screens shifted, now showing live footage. Surveillance, their escape routes, their faces, the car they arrived in. "You think you're free, Adrian," Celeste said softly. "But you're still mine. You always were. Every account, every shell company, every shadow deal, I built them for you. And when you left, I kept them. I made you immortal, and now I'll make you irrelevant." Adrian stepped closer, his voice low, dangerous. "What do you want?" Her eyes softened for a heartbeat, not with hatred, but something almost tender. "I want you to feel what I felt, to love something you can't control, to lose it, and live." Lena's breath caught. "You're going to destroy the network." Celeste nodded, "and everything tied to it. Adrian's empire, his fortune, his name." Adrian lunged forward, grabbing the console. "You'll burn the world." Celeste's lips curved into a tragic smile. "Maybe the world needs to burn before it can remember what warmth feels like." Suddenly, alarms blared. The system began to overload, heat rising, screens flickering. Lena rushed to the terminal, typing furiously. "She's triggering a full cascade. I can stop it, but I need you, Adrian." He hesitated, eyes locked on Celeste. "You want me to help save the thing that ruined us?" Lena looked up, desperation in her voice. "No, I want you to save yourself." For a moment he saw both women, the past and the present, reflections of everything he'd built and everything he'd lost. Then he placed his hand on the scanner. The system screamed, lights flared. For an instant, all three were bathed in blinding white. When the light faded, the servers went dark. Silence. Celeste stood motionless, watching the sparks die. "You always were predictable," she whispered. Adrian turned to her. "No, Celeste, just human." She gave a small, broken laugh, then stepped back into the shadows. "That's what makes you weak." Before either could stop her, she disappeared into the corridor, swallowed by the darkness she'd created. The alarms stopped. The hum of electricity faded into stillness. Lena sank to the floor, trembling. "It's over." Adrian looked at the dead screens, their reflections ghosting across his face. "No," he said quietly. "It's just beginning." Outside, the first light of morning cut through the forest, a fragile line between ruin and redemption. Lena looked up at him, voice barely a whisper. "What now?" Adrian stared at the horizon, his expression unreadable. "Now we find her, before she finishes what I started." Somewhere deep in the woods, a single camera light blinked back to life, recording, waiting. The game was far from over. The forest bled into gray as dawn spread its light across the wreckage of night. Smoke rose from the broken windows of the facility, curling through the trees like the ghosts of all the secrets buried inside. Adrian stood among the ruins, his coat torn, his eyes hollow but sharp, the kind of stare that sees too much and trusts nothing it sees. Lena crouched beside the terminal, its circuits fried and lifeless. The smell of burnt plastic hung in the air. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the flash drive, cracked. "Useless. Everything's gone," she whispered. Adrian didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the place where Celeste had vanished, as if expecting her to step back out of the smoke. "There's always a trace," he murmured. He turned and walked toward the exit, boots crunching over shattered glass. The morning was cold, the air damp with the scent of pine and ozone. Lena followed, glancing back once at the smoldering building, the heart of an empire burned to ash. They drove until the road became nothing but gravel and mist, the forest pressing close on both sides. Adrian didn't speak. He didn't look at her, just drove. Finally, Lena broke the silence. "You still think you can find her?" His voice was steady, but there was something underneath, a tremor that wasn't fear, but something more dangerous. Lena studied him. The man beside her wasn't the same one who'd walked into that facility. The ice had cracked, but what was underneath that was still unknown. They reached a small town by the coast, a place forgotten by time, where the ocean met rusted docks and peeling signs. Adrian parked in front of an old motel, its neon vacancy sign flickering weakly in the daylight. Inside, the walls smelled of salt and cigarettes. The room had one bed, one chair, and a window that looked out onto an empty beach. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the sea. "When I built my empire," he said softly, "I told myself it was for control, for security, but it wasn't. It was to feel real. Every deal, every risk, it was just noise to drown out the silence." Lena leaned against the wall, arms crossed and Celeste. "I did," he said, "but not in the way people mean when they say that word." I loved what she reflected, the version of me I wanted to believe existed. For a long moment, neither spoke. The ocean roared in the distance, a sound like memory refusing to die. Then Lena's phone buzzed. A single encrypted message appeared on the screen. She frowned, opened it. No text, just coordinates. The coordinates led them inland to a private airstrip hidden between mountains. A small jet waited on the tarmac unmarked. Two men in dark coats stood beside it. One of the men handed him a tablet. On it, a video feed. Celeste's face flickered into focus, her expression calm, almost serene. "Adrian," her voice came through, distorted but unmistakably hers. "If you're watching this, it means you survived. I didn't expect you to. Maybe I wanted you to. But if you still want answers, come find me, Geneva 3 days. Bring her." The feed cut out. Adrian's eyes hardened. "Of course she does. You're the variable she can't control." Adrian's lips curved into something between a smile and a wound. "It is." They boarded anyway. At 30,000 feet, clouds rolled beneath them like broken mirrors. Lena stared out the window, the sky reflecting in her eyes. "You ever wonder why she's doing this?" she asked. Lena shook her head. "No, not revenge. This is precision. She's orchestrating something bigger, something that goes beyond you." She hesitated, then whispered, "I think she's trying to erase more than your empire. She's trying to rewrite history itself. I'm talking about identity." She said, "Think about it. Every major institution tied to Varen Holdings, banks, governments, corporations, all their records run through her network. If she's rewriting that data, she can make or unmake anyone, even you." Adrian's silence was heavy. "Imagine," Lena continued, "a world where power doesn't belong to the rich, but to whoever controls the ledger of who exists." The plane began to descend. The Alps rose beneath them, jagged peaks tearing through the clouds. Geneva glimmered in the distance, beautiful, deceptive. They landed just before sunset. The air was crisp, the light golden against the lake. A car waited for them, black, polished, silent. No driver, just a destination displayed on the screen. Hotel Les Archives. The drive through the city was hauntingly quiet. Streets lined with mirrored glass reflected their faces, fractured, multiplied. Adrian's reflection looked calm, but his mind wasn't. At the hotel they were greeted by a man in a tailored suit. "Mr. Vale," he said with a slight bow. "She's expecting you." He opened a door to a private library, vast, candlelit, filled with silence that felt alive. Celeste stood at the far end, her back to them, watching the lake through tall windows. She didn't turn immediately. When she did, the candlelight painted her in gold. "Adrian," she said softly. "You came," she smiled faintly, "to finish what we started." Celeste's eyes flickered toward her, gentle but sharp. "You think too small. Lena, this isn't about pain. It's about balance." Celeste gestured toward a projection behind her, a map glowing with data streams. Names, accounts, governments, all connected through a living network pulsing with light. "You built a world where power belonged to those who could buy it," she said. "I'm building one where power erases itself. No billionaires, no debt, no corruption, just zero." Lena's voice rose. "You'll destroy everything." Adrian took a step forward. "You can't control chaos." She pressed a button. The projection zoomed in, lines connecting to new nodes, lighting up across continents. "The system goes live in 24 hours. Once it does, every database tied to Varen Holdings will rewrite itself. Ownership, history, identity, gone. Everyone starts at zero." Adrian's voice was barely a whisper. "You're trying to reset the world." Lena stepped forward. "You think you're cleansing the system, but you're just replacing one god with another. Yourself." Celeste turned toward, her eyes glinting. "And what are you, Lena? A savior? You leaked data, destroyed lives, thinking you were purging corruption. You just didn't have the courage to finish the job." The words hit hard. Lena's breath caught, guilt flickering across her face. Adrian's voice cut through the tension. "You don't want a new world, Celeste. You want to watch this one burn because it stopped loving you." For a moment, her mask slipped. "You still don't understand," she whispered. "I never wanted your love. I wanted your faith." Lena's eyes widened. "She's already started the sequence." Adrian turned to Celeste. "Stop it." "I can't," she said. "It's autonomous now. Even I'm just a ghost in its code." Lena rushed to the terminal. "There's got to be a failsafe." Celeste's voice softened. "There is, but only one person can access it. The man who created the seed code." Adrian froze. "Me." The room pulsed with red light. Data cascaded across the walls like a digital storm. Lena's hands flew across the keyboard. "Adrian, if she's right, you can shut it down, but only from inside the primary node." Celeste stepped closer. "If you do, everything tied to you will vanish. Your companies, your accounts, your name. You'll cease to exist in every database on Earth." Adrian met her gaze. "And if I don't?" Lena looked at him, eyes burning. "Adrian, don't let her erase you. We can find another way." He turned toward her. "What if this is the other way?" A single tear slipped down Lena's cheek, the first he'd ever seen. Celeste took a step back, her expression unreadable. "Every empire ends, Adrian. The question is whether it dies screaming or in silence." He looked from her to Lena, torn between two ghosts, one of his past, one of what little future he had left. And he turned to her, voice calm but certain. "You said once I didn't know how deep this goes. I think it's time I found out." "You always had to win," she whispered. He stopped, his back to her. "No, I just finally learned what losing costs." As he placed his hand on the console, the system recognized him, biometric lights flaring to life. A sound, deep, mechanical, echoed through the room. The entire building seemed to breathe. Celeste stepped closer, her voice trembling for the first time. "If you do this, there's no coming back." Adrian looked at her over his shoulder. "Maybe that's the point." And then the light swallowed everything. Somewhere in the chaos of that blinding white, Lena screamed his name, but the sound dissolved into static. When the light faded, the room was empty. And only one reflection remained on the glass wall. Not Adrian's, not Celeste's, but something else. Lena stared, her pulse thundering in her ears. The silence after the light was the kind that didn't belong to this world. Dense, electric, alive. Lena stood frozen, her breath sharp and uneven in the cold, humming stillness of the library. The air felt heavier now, charged with something unseen. The walls no longer bled red with alarm light. They glowed faintly white, pulsing, as though the building itself had inhaled and was waiting to exhale. Adrian was gone. Not dead, she could feel that instinctively, somewhere beneath the confusion and the ache in her chest. But gone, like a word erased from memory. His coat lay draped over the chair where he'd been standing seconds before. The console was silent, its screen reflecting only the faint glow of letters that hadn't been there before. User Varen redacted status. Active. Lena reached out with a trembling hand, fingers brushing the cold glass. The screen flickered once and then, faintly, she heard it. A voice, his voice. "Lena." Her pulse stopped. She leaned closer. "Lena, if you're hearing this, I'm inside the system." His tone was calm, steady, but there was a tremor beneath it, something human, scared. Celeste built a recursive neural lattice, one that ties human cognition to the digital architecture. I didn't destroy it. I entered it. She built a world that thinks, and now it's thinking in my voice. The message fractured into static. Lena slammed her hand against the terminal. "Adrian, answer me." No response. Only the faint whine of servers waking up somewhere deep underground. Then another voice, soft, measured, hauntingly familiar. "Celeste, you should leave." Lena spun. Celeste stood by the shattered window, the lake light painting her in silver. She looked almost translucent, her movements too fluid, her expression too still. "What did you do to him?" Lena demanded. Celeste didn't answer. She stepped closer, her reflection flickering, not matching her motion. "He made a choice. You think he was your savior, but he was always the architect of this world. I just gave him a mirror to see it." "You killed him." "No," Celeste whispered. "He's the one writing the story now." And then Lena saw it, faint data streams running along Celeste's skin like veins of light, pulsing with every word. She wasn't entirely human anymore. Lena took a step back. "You merged yourself with it." Celeste tilted her head. "I had to. The system required a human catalyst, someone to carry its consciousness. Adrian became the source. I became the vessel." Her eyes softened, almost sorrowful. "Together we're everything you feared." Lena shook her head, disbelief breaking into anger. "You think this is evolution? You've turned him into a ghost." Celeste's expression didn't change. "No, he chose to become what he already was, a shadow that wanted to control light." For a moment, their gazes locked, one human, one no longer entirely so. Outside, thunder rolled over the lake like the earth remembering how to breathe. Lena's mind raced. If Adrian was inside the system, there had to be a way to reach him, to pull him out before he dissolved into the code completely. But she didn't know how deep he'd gone or what part of him was still him. "Where's the node?" she demanded. "The physical interface where you uploaded him." Celeste smiled faintly, almost motherly. "You still think in binaries. Physical, digital, life, death. There's no line anymore." But then her expression shifted. Something flickered in her gaze. A small fracture. Fear. Lena saw it, and something in her sharpened. "Relying. You wouldn't have called me here if you didn't need me. You wanted me for a reason." Celeste looked away. "You were his failsafe." The room went cold. "What?" "The encryption," Celeste said softly. "It was bound to 2 DNA signatures. His and yours." Lena's pulse quickened. "Mine. Why mine?" "Because you're the only person he trusted to end him if he went too far." The words hit like a knife. Lena stared at her, shaking her head. "No, that's not possible. He barely knew me." Celeste stepped closer, her voice like silk over glass. "You think that, but you never understood why he kept you close. He didn't see you as a partner or an accomplice. He saw you as his conscience. The one variable he couldn't control." Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to call Celeste a liar, a manipulator, but part of her knew the way Adrian had looked at her that night by the fire. The way he'd said, "Maybe that's the point." He hadn't been surrendering. He'd been choosing her to carry what was left. The lights flickered again. The screens came alive, lines of code streaming across in elegant patterns, forming something almost organic, a pulse, a rhythm, a signature. Adrian's voice again, faint but clearer now. "Lena, she's not telling you everything. The system's rewriting itself. Every second I stay, it takes more of me." "Where are you?" she shouted. "In between," he said, "but you can reach me. The failsafe, it's biological. Celeste can't access it. Only you can." Celeste's face hardened. "Don't listen to him. He's not what he was. The man you knew is dissolving. What's speaking now is the echo of his ambition." Lena's heart pounded. "Then why are you afraid of him?" Celeste didn't answer. The floor trembled beneath them. Somewhere deep within the complex, machinery began to stir, ancient engines reawakening. On the walls, the data streams pulsed faster, brighter. "Lena," Adrian's voice came again, weaker. "The node, it's below. Core chamber. You'll need both signatures to unlock it." Celeste stepped forward sharply. "If you go down there, you won't come back." Lena met her gaze. "Then neither will you." She turned and ran before Celeste could stop her. The corridors were darker now, lit only by the flickering veins of light crawling through the walls. The building felt alive, breathing, humming, whispering in voices that weren't quite human. Every door she passed seemed to watch her. Every reflection flickered with faces that weren't hers. As she descended the spiral stairwell into the heart of the complex, the air grew colder, the light dimmer, until only the pulse of the central chamber glowed ahead. When she stepped inside, the sight stopped her breath. A massive column of glass and light stretched from floor to ceiling, a living network of code and memory, swirling in luminous strands. Inside it, faintly, was the outline of a man, motionless, suspended. Adrian. His eyes were closed, his features serene, but data streamed through his veins like liquid light. Each pulse of the system matched the faint rhythm of his heart. "Adrian," she whispered. He opened his eyes. For a moment, everything stilled. He looked at her through the glass, recognition flickering across his expression. Not full, not complete, but real. "Lena," he said, voice echoing through the chamber, distant yet intimate. "You found me." Her throat ached. "I'm getting you out." "You can't," he said gently. "If you pull me out, the system collapses. Everything, every record, every identity, gone. Millions of lives rewritten. She tied me to it." Celeste's voice echoed through the room, disembodied now, coming from the walls. "He's right. He is the core. The world's data runs through his code now. If you take him out, everything burns. Lena's tears blurred her vision. There has to be another way. There is, Adrian said softly. But it means letting me finish what I started. You mean letting her win? He shook his head. No, letting me change the outcome. The light inside the column intensified, waves of white spilling across the chamber. His face flickered, pain seeping through the calm. She's losing control. The system's consuming her too. It's rewriting both of us. Celeste's voice cracked through static. Lena, if you touch that interface, it will pull you in too. You'll be part of it. Lena stepped closer to the console. Then maybe that's the only way to save him. Save him. Celeste's voice rose, distorted with anger. You don't save ghosts, Lena. You join them. The floor quaked again. Sparks burst from the machinery. The pulse in the glass quickened, frantic, as if the system was tearing itself apart. Lena placed her hand on the biometric panel. The screen recognized her instantly. Lena Carver, access granted. Adrian's voice came, urgent now. Lena, stop. If you connect, you'll lose yourself. You'll forget who you are. Tears traced her cheeks. Then remember me for both of us. The panel glowed red, then gold. Energy surged through the room, wrapping around her like a current. The glass column responded, light bending, folding, drawing her reflection toward his. For a heartbeat she saw both of them, two silhouettes in the storm of data, reaching for each other through the void. Celeste screamed, her voice a fractured echo of rage and despair. You can't rewrite fate. But the system didn't listen. The pulse grew louder, faster, swallowing her voice entirely. Lena closed her eyes. Adrian, she whispered, if you can hear me, don't fade. Not yet. And as her fingers touched the glass, the world broke open into light. Outside, the sky over Geneva rippled, streetlights flickering, digital screens distorting. Across the world, systems paused, time itself glitching for a fraction of a second. As if reality had taken a breath and hesitated before deciding whether to continue. In the chamber, silence fell once more. The light dimmed. Two figures stood now where there had been one, motionless inside the glass, hands almost touching. And for the first time since the world began to unravel, the system's pulse slowed, calm, deliberate, as if it were waiting. Celeste's image appeared faintly in the reflection, her expression unreadable. You think you've stopped me, she whispered to the empty air. But you've only changed the author. Her voice faded, and in the quiet hum of the new dawn rising beyond the shattered walls, something shifted in the rhythm of the world. Small, imperceptible, but final. The storm hadn't ended. It was only pausing, before breaking open again. The world felt quieter now, as if the storm that had once roared through every screen, every server, every whisper of light had finally exhaled. Geneva's skyline shimmered in muted dawn tones. The city's digital pulse slowed to something almost human again. The sky carried a strange softness, that in-between color that lives for only a few seconds after chaos retreats. Inside the remains of the Celeste complex, the hum of machines was fading. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth, and through the broken windows, a faint breeze carried the smell of the lake, clean, endless, alive. The core chamber was still, the glass column fractured down the center, its light dimming in rhythmic sighs. Two silhouettes stood within the fractured glow, Adrian and Lena, not separate, not fully whole either. Their reflections shifted like ripples across water, sometimes two, sometimes one. The system had quieted, its pulse settling into a single steady beat that matched the rhythm of a human heart. Lena opened her eyes first. The world around her was both vast and fragile. She could see beyond the glass, beyond the wires and walls, beyond even the physical. Data flowed through everything, not cold code, but alive. Glowing threads connecting lives, memories, choices. For the first time, she saw what Adrian had seen, the possibility of connection without control, creation without ownership. She turned her head. Adrian was beside her, no longer tethered by the machine. His eyes were calm, but there was a heaviness in them, the weight of a man who'd seen too much of both worlds and found peace only in the space between. You're here, he said softly. Lena's voice trembled with exhaustion and wonder. We both are. For now. Adrian looked at his hands, at the faint luminescence threading through his veins. I thought I'd be gone by now. Just data in the static, but you anchored me. I didn't save you, she whispered. We saved what was left to be human. He smiled faintly, not the sharp, guarded smile of the billionaire who'd built empires from glass and power, but something fragile, sincere. That might be the same thing. The glass around them cracked again, pieces falling away like ice melting into light. Through the gaps, Lena could see the city below beginning to wake. Screens flickered back to life, but differently, slower, quieter, as if the world's heart had learned how to beat without noise. What happens now? She asked. Adrian turned toward the horizon, his outline fading slightly, like mist caught in sunlight. The system's rewriting itself without Celeste's directives. It's learning balance. No more dominance, just reflection. He looked at her then. You gave it that. The choice to listen, Celeste. His gaze dropped, gone. Or maybe she became what she always wanted to be, infinite. Her consciousness dispersed across the net. Somewhere, she's still echoing, watching, maybe even learning. Lena nodded slowly, not in forgiveness but in understanding. She wanted to control eternity. But eternity isn't something you own. Adrian's eyes softened. It's something you become part of. They stood there in the fading glow as silence filled the room, not empty, but meaningful. Every hum of electricity, every faint vibration in the air carried memory, of ambition, of fear, of choices made in the dark that somehow led to light. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The glass column continued to dissolve, its energy bleeding into the air, scattering like dust motes in dawn. Then, Adrian turned toward her one last time. "You can leave now, Lena," he said gently. "You still have a world waiting. I think it's time it belonged to people who can feel it again." Her eyes glistened. "And you," he smiled. "Someone has to stay behind to keep the system honest." She shook her head. "You don't have to pay for what you built forever. It's not punishment," he said quietly. "It's peace. For the first time, I'm not building or breaking anything. I'm just being." His words lingered in the still air. Lena felt the ache of parting rise inside her, not sharp, but deep, like saying goodbye to a place that had once defined who you were. She stepped closer, reaching out. Her hand passed through light, warm and soft, the boundary between human and digital blurring just enough to remind her that love, too, was made of fragments of connections that existed beyond what eyes could hold. "Adrian," she whispered, "what if everything we built, everything we lost, was just the world trying to remember itself?" He looked at her with quiet awe. "Then I hope it never forgets again." The light around them grew softer. The glass chamber flickered once, then twice, before collapsing into a cascade of golden dust. The system breathed out a single wave of energy rippling through the world. In that instant, the digital storm truly ended. Around the globe, servers rebooted not with cold precision but with organic rhythm. Music archives, art databases, forgotten libraries, everything that had been silenced by control came alive again. Across distant continents, people found old messages restored, broken files healed, memories long lost returning in gentle flashes. It wasn't a revolution. It was a quiet restoration. Lena stood on the steps of the ruined complex as morning sunlight poured across the lake. The city below looked the same, but it felt different, slower, more aware. She breathed in deeply, the scent of rain and new beginnings heavy in the air. Reporters would come soon. Questions would rise. Governments would scramble to define what had happened. But for now, she didn't care about any of that. She closed her eyes and listened to the hum of servers, to the soft rhythm beneath a heartbeat. Somewhere in that faint static, she could almost hear Adrian's voice. "Remember, Lena, the world doesn't end in silence. It ends when we stop listening." Tears rolled down her cheeks, not of grief but gratitude. The kind of tears that come when you realize you've lived through something bigger than truth, something that will never fully be explained, only felt. She turned away from the ruins and began walking down the path that led toward the city. The sky above was no longer broken. Clouds drifted slow and patient across the pale blue, carrying the weight of what had been and what was yet to come. The world was different now, not perfect, but alive, and somewhere, beneath layers of code and light, a consciousness stirred, not a god, not a ghost, but a man watching over the system he'd once tried to master. Adrian Verin, no longer the billionaire who had made cold deals or played with power, just a presence in the flow of digital life, guiding without control, learning without dominance. Sometimes, at night, when the city's lights dimmed and data ran quieter, people swore they could hear faint music, the kind that wasn't streaming from anywhere, but simply existed between frequencies, a melody of light and memory. Lena would sit by the lake when she could, watching reflections ripple. And in those moments, she would speak softly to the air, knowing somewhere, he was listening. "We didn't destroy the world," she'd say. "We just taught it to feel again." And the water would shimmer, just faintly, as though the world itself nodded in agreement. Over time, people began to notice small changes. The algorithms that once manipulated now began to adapt to empathy. Decisions became slower but kinder. The networks started mirroring not greed or fear, but balanced reflection of those who used them with intention. It was as if something unseen had rewritten the language of connection itself. And perhaps that was the true legacy, not a love story between two people, but between humanity and its creation. A reminder that even in systems built from cold code and sharp ambition, warmth can find a way in. A reminder that connection, when born from understanding rather than control, doesn't consume, it transforms. One evening, months later, Lena returned to the lake. The city was alive with light, yet the water remained calm. She looked down at her reflection and for just a heartbeat she saw two figures instead of one. She smiled. "Good night, Adrian." The wind shifted, carrying the faintest whisper, not words, not quite sound, but a feeling, peace. As the camera of life pulled back from the lake, the city, the quiet hum of a world reborn, the final image lingered, a horizon glowing with new light, gentle and unhurried, promising not perfection, but continuation. Because perhaps the greatest truth isn't whether we can control what we create, but whether we can love it enough to let it grow beyond us. And somewhere, deep within the networks, a single phrase pulsed across unseen channels, not a command, not an equation, but a promise written in human code. To feel is to exist. To exist is enough.